Hey everybody, BW the Marriage Guy here. Welcome to the next episode of Marriage Grind. I'm always making sure that I'm bringing out some valuable content to bring value to your life. If you're a couple, you're married, or if you're single, this is for you. Today, I have the honor and privilege of bringing in someone who is doing a great job. He's killing it with the millennial generation. He discovered, and his story is very impactful, he discovered this need when he was himself going through this process. So I'm gonna go ahead and let us tune in. I got Jay Cadet all the way from Harlem, New York. I interviewed him just this past week. I want you to tune into the interview. Hope you receive something from it. I'll talk to you in a few minutes. All right, thank you guys for joining me. Like I did say in the intro, I have a special guest here. My man is killing it over there in Harlem, New York. I got Jay Cadet on the line. Jay, what's up, man? You there?
What's happening, man? How you doing?
I'm good, bro. I'm good. Thank you for joining us on Marriage Grind. And as you know, this platform is designed to inspire couples and singles and to give them resources and helping people with their relationships and preparing people who are single for marriage. And Jay, I know you and I we've had an opportunity to talk, and I was talking to you about how you got started just on this platform. Tell us how you got started with the idea of reaching millennial couples.
Well, more specifically, unmarried millennial couples, man. That's really important because just on my own journey with my wife and I, before we got married, we were looking for help, right? Like most couples, well, like a lot of couples out there, we want to make sure we're doing it right. And so first thing we did was we went to the church. This is the church we were going to get married in. We went to the pastor. Hey, can we get some tips and advice and some insight on how we can make this thing work? It was helpful, but to be honest with you, man, it wasn't what we were really looking for. It wasn't really specific. It was more generic and just, be mindful of these 10 things, and it was cool, but I said, there has to be something more. And so we went out and we did some premarital counseling with a therapist, which again, it was cool, but we didn't really connect with the person who we were working with. She didn't necessarily work with millennial couples in particular. So we didn't really feel like she was addressing our issues the way, we would have liked them to be addressed. So when I became a coach, and this became something I was really interested in, I said, man, I really want to provide a platform for couples who are in that space, and provide advice, tips, insight, coaching around the unique experiences that we have in our generation, especially given that, a lot of us take a lot longer to get married. A lot of us are focusing on other things besides marriage during that time. And so that's really important. And so that's what I help couples deal with now.
And you were an architect during that time frame.
I practiced architecture. That's what I went to school for. I practiced it for about 8 or 9 years before I made the switch. Yeah.
And that's the funny thing is, there are so many people who are probably doing or they're probably in a job right now, and they don't really have a passion for that particular job or their industry. Now I don't know if you were passionate about being as an architect or not, but it sounds like you found your calling. It sounds like you have found your calling as far as being able to help couples reaching their potential and helping them work out their issues before they get married. I can commend that. You said something about, millennials have a lot of things going on besides getting married. Why do you feel that millennials are not getting married?
That's a good question, man. What's funny is I'll tweak that a little bit because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about millennials and marriage, right?
Okay.
The way I would tweak it is to say, why aren't millennials getting married as soon as, the previous generations did? For us, I just think we take longer to get married. What's interesting is there was a Pew Research poll done a few years ago. I think it was maybe 2014 or so. And they found that when they were asking millennials about their interest in being married, there was only 4% who said we're not interested in marriage itself, right? I think there was something like 30%, maybe a little bit more, who said we're just not sure, right? We're not 100% on it. But majority are interested in marriage, and the marriage industry is still booming. It's still alive and well. I think the thing is that, like I said before, we're focusing on other things. We're focusing on our careers. We're focusing on our finances. We're focusing on our maturity, right? That's a big thing. A lot of people feel like, I don't want to share my life with someone until I know I'm personally ready for what that entails, right? And they want to make sure they're mature enough to take on that responsibility. And so, we've seen, a lot of us have seen our parents go through divorces, right? I'm one of those people. My parents got divorced at a young age. My mom is on her third marriage. So for me, well, for a lot of us, that affects how we view marriage. And so I think more so than not, instead of us saying, you know what, I'm over this marriage thing, I'm not getting married, most of us say, hey, listen, I see the mistakes that my parents made. I don't want to make those mistakes. How can I identify what went wrong and avoid those in my own relationship? And usually that starts with us saying, you know what, let's just take our time.
I like that. And, my parents, they divorced when I was they separated when I was about 2 years old. Mm-hmm. So when I saw that, I was like kind of shocked, because I was like, man, I love my dad. I don't want to be away from my dad like that.
Yeah.
But I also love my mom. So I didn't have a divided loyalty, but I did see my mom get remarried. And, when you grow up in a blended family, it's hard to adapt to a new parent, and you don't learn to appreciate them until about later. Now, you mentioned something that I think that many people need to understand. I think what many people need to understand is that it's culture. It's the culture of your home, and that follows you everywhere you go. And I've been on that train for a little bit for about the past week or two, because I've been talking about that. And kind of the big thing that I'm seeing that couples are struggling with is the communication piece. And when couples don't communicate about the issues that they have to face in their life, it impacts their marriage. And this goes back to culture and home. They could have learned communication there. Tell us a little bit about why you feel that couples are struggling with communication.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, in how you introduced it, the culture in the home, right? Because what we're bringing into a relationship is our habits that we've learned throughout the course of our lives, whether it was just in the home or it was in school or with our friends, or however we learned how to communicate growing up. The way we communicated might have worked in those situations, right? So for instance, you might have grown up with a bunch of siblings. And so you realize that in order for you to be heard and to get what you wanted, you had to shout a lot. Maybe you had to be loud or be aggressive in how you communicated, right? That doesn't necessarily work in your relationship if you're with someone who doesn't understand that, or who doesn't connect with that type of communication. Maybe you're with someone who grew up as an only child. And this is the dynamic in my relationship, in my marriage, right? With me and my wife. It's like, I grew up with siblings. She grew up as an only child. How I communicate and how she communicates are very different. And so when you aren't aware of the habits you're bringing into the relationship as it pertains to your communication, there's often a disconnect that you're not ready for, right? So say you're very aggressive in how you communicate. That used to work, but because it's not working right now, you're like, hold on a second, like, I'm doing my part, right? How come you're not hearing me? How come you're not understanding where I'm coming from? And vice versa. If you're with someone who's an only child, one thing I realized was, man, she never had those close siblings to really bounce her thoughts and ideas off of all the time. So she's she deals with things in her head.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I interpreted that a certain way, and it made me feel a certain way. And over time, I'm like, man, she's not opening up to me the way I expect, or she's not saying things or dealing with her issues the way I expect. And that became something we had to address, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're not aware of what those habits are, it can create a lot of disconnect. When you become aware of them and you're able to say, okay, this is my communication style. This is your communication style. How do we make that work? How do we mesh? How do we understand each other on a deeper level? that's where the connection comes from, and you can start to really hear and understand where you guys are coming from and build strong communication.
And some couples, when they get married, you have some people who are kind of like a disappearing act, where they fade away in moments of confrontation. They don't know how to have conversations. And then you have those very direct, in your face personalities, like you were talking about. I call them direct, kind of in your face personality. And a lot of people don't value transparency. The funny thing is, I actually just sent this message out on Instagram today about how forgiveness and transparency are key ingredients. They're not the key ingredients, but they are key ingredients to having a successful relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think you were talking about transparency. Can you describe transparency and why it's important in a relationship?
You say it's maybe not the key ingredient. I would argue though, man, that's one of those foundational elements of what makes a relationship successful long term, right? Mm-hmm. So here, let me tell you why. When you're used to having a lot of shorter relationships don't require a deep level of transparency. You haven't really gotten to that point where you've really opened up the depths of yourself or been open and really honest and painfully honest with the person that you're with. And so when coming off of the dating scene, I always tell people, listen, you might not be used to being that transparent with your partner, but what happens is over time, as you get deeper into your relationship, you start to realize how key transparency is to building trust, mm-hmm. right? And so the thing about trust is that a lot of times people expect to get trust by asking for it, or you just expect it to happen because you're in a relationship. And I get a lot of couples who I work with when they're dealing with recovering from betrayal of some sort, where it's just like, man, if you forgive me, you should trust me again. And I always say, look, first of all, trust is something you have to work for, right? It requires an effort. It's something the burden is on you to prove that you're trustworthy. Mm-hmm. And in order to get to that place, it requires you to be transparent, right? So it requires you to show your partner who you really are. And not just in good times. To be honest, being transparent in the good times doesn't really have much value, right? Like, it's cool and it's fun. Oh yeah, he's really funny and, but it's just like, when you really want your partner to trust who you are, you have to show integrity. You have to show your character under times of stress and difficult moments. And when you really show your partner, hey, we were faced with this difficult situation. This is how I felt about it. This is what I was struggling with. This is where I am now. This is what we should do. That's what really creates that bond where you can say, I can trust this person because I know who they are at the core. And I think that's critical. That is so critical to making a relationship work. I think too often we take that transparency for granted, especially in a world where locks, the lock on the phone is the norm in a lot of relationships. It's like, I'm not interested in my partner, or I don't want my partner to see, what's happening in here. Right. Which I think usually when you know what's happening in here, you really know who a person really is, right? When you know what's beyond that passcode. But in a world where we're like, I have my personal sort of my space that I don't want to let my partner into, it's very difficult to build that trust through transparency when you're not being transparent.
It's funny you pick that up, man, because the phone is the big. I mean, I can honestly tell you, I've seen couples either have big blowout arguments because of the iPhone or the Android, whatever software or phone you're using. But I've seen a lot of couples have arguments over who you talking to on the phone, who text you, or they link it back to an old relationship that they got out of. And the next thing you know, they're bringing it into their new relationship. And, who are you talking to? Well, man, I'm just talking to my mom. What the? Can I live? Can I breathe? What's up?
Right.
And me working on the platform I'm working on, I'm having to talk to couples about this all the time. And I'm saying to myself, no, let's really deal with the root of why this is going on. And I think that is also sub-level 2 transparency.
Yeah.
So with us being transparent, it might allow us to get to the root cause of why you may act where you act. Maybe you had a parent that was a disappearing act and they didn't confront or they didn't have confrontation. They avoided it. And that's why you're struggling in your relationship with communicating. I know that you said that there was, and I noticed on your website you have this thing about the 4 conversations every unmarried couple needs to have about their relationship. That's a form of transparency. Tell me or tell us about that specifically.
About the ebook or about the 4 conversations?
About the 4 conversations. I'm curious.
Yeah. So the idea for this ebook came up where during a few sessions or over a handful of sessions that I was having with different couples. This was just a time when I was just having a lot of intake sessions at that time, right? And I was like, man, when I'm talking to these couples about the issues they're dealing with, there seems to be a series of things that were not discussed. Mm-hmm. That were at the root of why they're here, right? Why they were doing that session to begin with. And so what I like to do is I'm like, listen, if I could put this information in an ebook format and give it away for free so people can see just before these issues come up, that it's important to have these conversations and how to have these conversations. And I have a few conversation starters in the ebook as well. So they're just like a series of questions you can ask each other to get the convo going. It'll save people from having to come see me. So the 4 conversations are as such. One is a check-in, right? A check-in is, look, every month, or you set up whatever the frequency you feel comfortable with, get together and talk about how the relationship is going, right? Mm-hmm. Check the pulse of the relationship. How are you feeling? Is there any issue that you have that maybe we haven't been addressing, or maybe you feel uncomfortable addressing? Can we talk about it? When you do that, and it's not even just about problems, right? But it's also about the good things. Hey, what do you want to do this month? How do you want to, what do you want to do for date night? It could be whatever. Just check the pulse of the relationship. And the reason that's so critical is because we get into these cycles, right? Where we just start getting real comfortable with each other. We stop having the conversation about the relationship and things begin to pile up. Mm-hmm. So you might have had an issue you've been carrying around for a while that maybe you haven't had time, right, to discuss it, or maybe you just feel a little nervous about whether the conversation is going to go over well or not, and right. So let me not say anything. This is the opportunity for you to feel comfortable opening up, like we said before, being transparent about what's happening, so you can address the issues in your relationship before they end up becoming these huge problems that you end up fighting and blowing up about.
Now, discussions are going to happen, okay? They're going to happen. And and I know that as hard as we work, we could do the best we can to prevent these couples from having blowouts or not. It's either they take the advice or they don't. And there's a lot of people who might look at this video and they may say, well, how do I know that how do I know that I'm having a transparent relationship? How do I know that I'm having an open and direct, clear communication in my relationship? And that's the last question. Like, how can a couple be able to measure their effective communication?
Man, how do I know if I'm being transparent? That is there's a very simple answer for that. If you look at the past 6 months of your relationship and you haven't had a conversation that made you uncomfortable, you haven't had a conversation that you were afraid to say what was really going on in your heart and your mind, you haven't been being transparent. Right? It's that simple, because transparency is uncomfortable. Transparency is opening up parts of yourself that you don't feel comfortable showing the world. And when you have a relationship in which you have a space where you feel comfortable having that conversation, let me not say comfortable, where you feel safe having that conversation, you have a great relationship. And that is sort of the litmus test for whether, in my opinion, that's a litmus test of whether your relationship is in a good place or not, right? You're able to have those difficult conversations.
Right. So I guess the best way to measure it is if you can get to a point where you can have those difficult conversations and be able to not be bitter and angry, but you know that your relationship is growing. That's a great indicator.
Absolutely. And just one other thing in terms of how those conversations look. I mean, what ends up happening in most of these conversations we have, or when it comes to disagreements and arguments in a relationship, is you're often not talking about the real issue, right? And so I don't know if it's been like that with your experience with couples. I'm sure it has, where they come in and they're talking about this problem. And you're like, okay, like I see why you guys are arguing about this, but that's not the real problem, right? Like that has really nothing to do with why you guys are here. And so you start probing and asking questions and engaging, right? And then they start to open up and say, okay, well, you know what? I felt a certain way about this because, maybe I felt guilty about something that was happening, or I didn't like this issue. I didn't like what he did because it made me feel, it made me feel shameful about what I was doing. And it's like those underlying feelings that we don't really want to discuss. So we talk about the surface stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Under those underlying feelings, when you start talking about that stuff, that's what really allows you to get to the core of the issue and address it in a way that it doesn't keep coming back.
Yeah.
That's being transparent.
Wow. And you know what? I think you said a lot today. And, I hope that you guys picked up a lot from this conversation, because Jay, he's been doing this for the past 5 years. And I know that a lot of the things that he's talking about, maybe you might find yourself in that position where your relationship may not be as transparent as it needs to be. And there needs to be open and direct, clear communication. I hope that this is something that you can look at, and maybe Jay could help you. His website, for those that are interested in looking up Jay, and you might be looking at his services, his website is jcadet.com. Okay. You can also go to his Twitter, is @jcadet. And then also Instagram is the same as @jcadet. It is JAYCADET. And then also you can hit him up on Facebook. It's facebook.com/CO3Studio. That's how you can reach him. Jay, one last thing, man, before I let you go. I heard that you're a hip hop junkie, man.
Absolutely.
So tell us your top 2 artists, man, in the hip hop game, man. If you had to name 2 artists, like I know there's a lot, but just name 2.
You're making this difficult. This is the hardest question you asked me in this interview, man. So right now or overall?
I'm not too big on the artists in the game now, man. Hip hop's kind of changed over the course of the years. So, how about we go let's say all time? Top 2.
I would have to put that on. I'll pick one. Everybody knows, obviously, that between the two, the Jay-Z and the Nas. My guy is Jay. I'm a Jay-Z guy. But I'll pick a newer guy, though, who I think who doesn't get enough shine, who I think he should, and that's Lupe Fiasco.
Ooh.
I would say my favorite artist right now is Kendrick, but I just want to put a spotlight on Lupe, man, because that dude, he has some real music between his old stuff and his new stuff. He does the popular stuff, but I love the fact that his music has depth. It has a message. And it's just good. It's good music.
That's what's up, man. I'm a Kendrick Lamar guy, man. So I appreciate his work. I don't know about this other album he came up with. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I'm big on Kendrick, man. Right. I thought you were going to say Tupac. No, I thought you were going to say Biggie because of the New York, the New York thing.
Nah, I feel you. Well, that's what Jay is for, man. Jay-Z covers that. The New York thing. I am between Biggie and Pac. I am a Biggie guy though. Okay. I don't dislike Pac, but I just grew up with more Biggie influence. But if you don't mind, I want to take a moment to just plug this platform.
Go ahead.
I want to let everybody know about this platform my wife and I have partnered up to build. It's called Going Steady. The website is goingsteadyapp.com. Essentially, it's a place where people in relationships can go to find resources that are relevant to helping them improve their relationships. It's super easy. Right now it's in development, so we do have a waiting list for people who want to try it out and use the platform. It should be launching within the next month or so. So head over to goingsteadyapp.com, sign up for it, get on the mailing list, and we're going to let you know as soon as it drops.
All right. Well, hey, there you have it. Jay just dropped the mic. Jay, thank you for joining us, man. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.